So we will be tackling the registration and login, normally how we can register to become data providers. The famous GEMS food template that we will be using in our breakout rooms, or we will be using a similar template in order to collect and organize our data, because we all understood that our data should be organized in a very well consistent and standardized way. And we will be having one example of call for data. Everyone amongst us who work or participate in Codex committees, they always hear about a call for data, right? So we have a call for data, we have a call for data. We have to reply, we have to respond to this call for data. So we will take one example and see that us in the region, we can participate in providing a lot of data. For this module, at the end of this module, we will be able, hopefully, to know how to register for access and set up as a data provider. So to set up a data provider account on the GEMS food platform. We will be reviewing and understanding the requirements in details for data collection and submission using the GEMS food template. And for this particular template, we will be relying on the famous document I introduced for you that was recently adopted by CCCF 18. All technical information can be found in this document, but what we're trying to do in this training is to facilitate the understanding of this technical information. And know that we have to participate and be more active in responding to calls for data issued by the JECFA Secretariat, at least related to contaminants. So what is this GEMS food database? And Dr. Eli spoke a bit about it also as a source of consumption data. And here we will be speaking more about it as a source of occurrence data. So this is the Global Environment Monitoring System. That's the GEMS, GEMS, Food Contamination Monitoring and Assessment Program, which is commonly known as the GEMS food. And since 1976, it informed governments, the Codex Alimentarius Commission, and its scientific subsidiary or advisory bodies, such as the risk assessors, JMPR and JECFA, as well as other relevant institutions and the public. So this database is publicly accessible. But the most important thing, we have to understand how to feed this database, how to participate as data providers. That's the interface, the famous GEMS food interface. So if you go simply to Google and you add GEMS food database, you can access right away this landing page on the WHO website. So right away, if we check this interface or this page, we can see that we can filter. We have several levels of filtering that we can use in order to select our data. So just by looking at this page, we can start understanding that when submitting our data should be well classified and well organized. Otherwise, we cannot filter the data in order to be able to use it, okay? So here, if we're using the search option, I am using the data here, and I want to search for a data, at least I will have to indicate some filters, right? So I will be indicating, for example, the WHO region. So that's my geographical indication. I will, let's say I'm doing a study and I will need data coming from a particular region, and WHO has a geographical classification and distribution of regions or countries in different regions. I will be picking or selecting the contaminant, right? I'm aiming to have data related to lead, to cadmium. And then we see that we have a certain classification of our food. So that's what we call the food mapping. And we will be discussing further the importance of mapping our food. نحن بحاجة أن ننظم all indications related to the food and related to the contaminant itself. So as you can see here, we're saying that we have at least to select what is called a food category, which is the first level of classification, the broad classification. And then we have a second level of food classification, which is called here the food name. And we will be working a lot on that during our afternoon. And if you click on this link, okay, this link will redirect you to the homepage of the GEMS food database, where also you can find a lot of material. So we have introductory PDFs, and you can find all the information that I will be introducing here. Not speaking a lot about the food consumption part, but just to tell you again and to repeat the information that was presented by Dr. Eli, GEMS Food has also food consumption data accessible, and they have geographical divisions and distribution of countries according to different WHO regions. And here you can see the different, what we call it, diet clusters. So we have 17 cluster diets. And when we will be accessing food consumption data through GEMS, this food consumption data will be representative of cluster diets or an association of countries. But that's not our objective here to speak more about consumption data. So we will skip this information and dive in the part related to the occurrence data. Now, first, it's very important to register. Okay, so I invite you to register as a user of the GEMS food database. It doesn't mean that we are obliged to have an account. You can access now right away the GEMS food database as a simple user, and you can filter the data, and you can download even the data as Excel templates. You can have that. But whether using the database or submitting data to the database, it's more interesting to have an account, because having an account will provide you access to different level of features and options. Now, how to have an account? It's not like a simple thing and you will connect and sign up. No, you have to send a request to the GEMS food administrator. Okay, so it's normally the idea is to have an official account for the competent authority or for the country, and this official account or this official data manager for the country or for the institution will be communicating with the GEMS food database. Not anyone can go to the GEMS food database and upload data. Okay, so data providers should first register and create a WHO login, address, and password through sending an email giving more details about the institution, you are representing which institution, why it is important for you to become a data provider, why it's important for you to become a data provider and have access to the GEMS food database. Okay, so through sending an email to the following address you see here, gems_food@who.int. The institution owning the data should provide the GEMS food administrator with contact details to have it listed as a collaborating institution. Once logged in to the database, the user will have access to the famous Excel template that you can use in order to organize, fill your data, and submit the data to the GEMS food database. Okay, so I'm speaking here from both perspectives. As a user فقط كمستخدم للبيانات أو as a provider of data, it's important and interesting to have an account, but again, not everyone will have an account. Okay, so it should be sent through an official request in order to have an account created. And we can understand why, because it's a very important database. Not anyone will have the possibility to upload data to it. Once we connect to this database, we will be accessing what we call templates of data. I will not here give further details because I will be detailing that in the upcoming slides and through the breakout rooms, but just for you to know that we have Excel templates that we will be using in order to upload our data as a bulk set of data, or we can introduce our data individually one by one. And as you can understand that the best way to do that is to have like a template and upload our data as a bulk system, because normally we have thousands of data points to be shared and uploaded. So it's through an Excel template, an Excel system. Now, a few important words about this food mapping. We want to submit our occurrence data. Again, what is our occurrence data? Simply the concentration. Okay, I'm submitting the concentration of a certain contaminant. Okay, how to submit it? How to give the information related to the food commodity? As you can also Imagine. It's very important to classify and to give the needed information related to our food commodity, right? Because all our assessment and my assessment afterwards will rely on the understanding also of my food commodity. And then I will have to link it with its consumption, etc. So I will need to have a clear information related to the food commodity itself. That's why the GEMS food database has a two-level classification system. And it's already mapped, or the FoodX, the famous FoodX2 classification at the European level, is already mapped and taken into consideration into the WHO or the GEMS food classification. What is this classification? I have the concentration of lead in a certain herb, okay? Or a certain spice, or a certain mixture of spices, or a certain vegetables, raw, legumes, frozen, powder, dried. I need to give the needed specifications related to the food, right? So that's the food mapping exercise that we have to standardize. We cannot adopt different systems of food mapping. That's why it's very important for the country to start by setting its food mapping system. And we will discuss furthermore about this information. So for the GEMS food system, it's a two-level classification. The first level, what is called the WHO food group, corresponds to 23 broad categories usually reported in food consumption surveys, plus one category for feed. So here we're speaking about the first level of food mapping, the broad category. Okay, let's say cereal and cereal products. That's the broad category. But is it enough to categorize my food commodity? It's not enough. I need to give further details. So I will be using a second level called the WHO food identifier, which corresponds to the detailed food descriptors used in the Codex Alimentarius committees and to foods, giving more indication. Let's say wheat. Okay, so I had cereal and cereal-based products. The second level, I will be giving the name of my food, but according also to a standardized food classification. And we will see together that the GEMS food template gives also a third field called in order for us to give even more information about the food. So I can go even for a three-level categorization system. I can give you the example that we had to deal with recently related to ready-to-eat peanuts. Okay, within the CCCF and Codex, we have this very well-known classification. We have for further processing, and we have ready to eat. So they requested a third level of indication and information in order for the GEMS administrator to understand whether this food commodity is ready to eat, and in order to have this level of specifications, okay? So we can go even for a third level of indications. So that's our food mapping. We will be doing 1.5 hours exercising on that. And it's important to know for you who knows the FoodX2 food mapping, that FoodX2 communicates with the GEMS food mapping, okay? We cannot have at national or regional or international level completely different systems of mappings. We need to have food mapping that can communicate in order for us to be able to combine our data. That's exactly what I was saying, okay? So when you connect to this GEMS food database, what we will be doing this afternoon, you will see that, for example, in the broad group, I can select alcoholic beverages, animal feed, cereal and cereal-based products, composite food, drinking water, eggs and egg product. That's the general first layer classification. Then when I select one of the classifications, I will have another list. For example, if I select the cereals and cereal-based products, then I will have to select, is it bread and other cooked cereal products, buckwheat, maize, etc. So I'm giving more specifications. And here you can see that I have two interesting categories. The first one, cereal grains in capital letter. You can see it. So I have cereal grains in capital letter, and I have cereal and cereal-based product with NES with it. Okay, NES is not elsewhere specified. How do we use that? Okay, let's say I have a result, I have a data, I know that it is a cereal and cereal-based product, but I have no other information. I know that it belongs to the group, the broad group of cereal and cereal-based product. You remember what we said? We can use any data that we have. We will not throw any data, but we will have to understand the limitations and the uncertainties coming with the data. Let's say I have a certain data stating that it's cereal and cereal-based product. I will not throw it away. The second level of indication, because I don't have any more information about it, I will select cereals and cereal-based products, NES, not elsewhere specified. It means that I have a result for a food commodity. I don't know which one. It could be maize, it could be wheat, it could be other baked products belonging to this group category, but I will not throw this data away because in some instances, perhaps I'm fixing limits or provisions for the broad category. So I will be using this information. I don't need more information. Okay, we're good? So if I have a result, like I have the lead concentration for a food coming from this group, I can select here, as we said, the cereal and cereal-based product, NES. Now, if I know that it belongs to the cereal and cereal-based products, and I know the food commodity, but the food commodity doesn't exist in this list. It's not here. For example, za'atar. You will not find it here. Okay? So what I will give it as an indication, I will use the capital letter thing. Okay, so I will be using the capital letter identifier for the second level of classification. So in all situations, and then I can use the third field, as I said, which is normally consecrated to give more details in order to say it's za'atar. Okay, and here, since I'm adopting a very strict, concise, and standardized way, the data manager and the data user can use easily this data and understand that this concentration is comes from this food commodity. Now, let's dive into the different fields of this GEMS food template. So these are the requirements for my data. If I want to submit data, I need at least to have the majority of this information, and you will see for some requirements they are optional, some other requirements they are mandatory. So let's start with that. So of course we have, for example, a field titled local food identifier. It's a free text. Serial number of the record. It's a free text. Let's say these are numbers or serial numbers to indicate this, to give more information about this data point. Then submitting country, region. Is it a Codex observer or a member country? So we will have a drop-down menu and we will select the country, right? When you submit your data, you have to tell me this data is representative of which country or which region. Or I am an observer. I'm not a member country, but still I'm submitting data. Then we have to indicate the contaminant. Okay, we will have a drop-down list and we will be selecting, let's say we have lead, we have cadmium, etc. Then we will have the food origin, which is a drop-down menu stating, for example, that the food is locally produced, imported, unknown. That's another layer of information that we need in our dietary exposure assessment. I need to understand my food, is it imported or locally produced? Sampling date, okay? When the sample was taken, I have to give a year. You remember we said in a lot of situations, we have to know exactly the year of this result. Sample representativeness. I have a drop-down menu also giving information about the sampling plan. This result comes from a targeted sampling, or it comes from a random sampling, or I don't know. A lab identification. So I can give here more indication about my lab, my institution, the institution submitting the data. And you can see always if this level of information is mandatory for the GEMS food or it's optional. Then, of course, we have to provide information related to the analytical quality assurance for the data, right? So I have the field analytical quality assurance. We will be selecting here from a drop-down menu. So when you have your Excel, you click, you have a drop-down menu. And I will say that my lab has an internal quality assurance, let's say. Or we successfully participate in some proficiency testing. Or we are an officially fully accredited lab. So we have to inform the GEMS food about the level of our quality assurance. Then measurement units. And believe me, if we review the most frequent error affiliated with the submitted data, unfortunately, they are linked to the units of the result submitted. We have a lot of errors, so pay attention, please, about the units. Is it a milligram per kilogram, or is it a microgram per kilogram? Or nanogram per kilogram, but normally for the GEMS food results, they will be milligram per kilograms, ppms, or micrograms per kilograms, ppps. Then the famous limit of detection and limit of quantification. They will ask us to provide the limit of detection and limit of quantification. However, ideally, it's very important and interesting to have both. Okay, and we will have further details about that because we will be substituting the non-detects. When you submit your data, right, you will have a lot of data points saying that non-detected, right? Or non-quantified, or below the limit of quantification, which is different. When I start doing my calculations, I have different scenarios that we will be detailing tomorrow. One of them is to replace the text non-detect by 0 or by the value of the LOD. So in order for me to do that and have both options, not only replacing the non-detected by 0, but having also the option of replacing the non-detect by the value of LOD, you need to submit the LOD. Okay? But in case we're not submitting LOD, at least it is mandatory to submit the LOQ. We cannot work with a data set not having the LOQ. Okay? That's the minimum mandatory requirement. The difference between LOD and LOQ, the LOD is the limit of detection, which is the lowest or smallest concentration, starting from which we can say that we can detect our contaminant, and we are sure that it is different from the noise of the analytical method. And the limit of quantification is the lowest concentration, starting from which we can say that we can quantify our contaminant, we can give it a quantitative value with an acceptable error. That's the definitions. So if it's very important to understand what is LOD, what is LOQ. If you are handling the data, you cannot handle the data if you cannot differentiate between what is LOD and LOQ and understand it deeply. Then results based on, that's also a very important information. Normally when we provide the results, are they based on dry weight, or this is a result based on fresh weight or as consumed? So you have to tell us. This is a result, a concentration based on dry weight calculations. And here we will have a factor completely different than a result presented on the basis of a fresh weight or as consumed. Portion analyzed, state of the food analyzed. Is it cooked, raw, unknown, frozen? Then the result itself, so the concentration of my contaminant. Then, is it coming from an individual sample? It is an individual data point result, or coming from a pool of results? So you aggregated some data points, you calculated an average, and you're submitting the average. It's important for us to understand. It's an individual data point, or it's a result coming from a pool of results. Confidentiality of data, whether the data is confidential or not. And this is to tell you that you can still submit even confidential data and saying that your data is confidential. So they will use it without disclosing the data, etc. Okay? And further information, the country of production. So we have the country from which we sampled our food, but if we have the information about the country of production of the food, it's always also interesting to have it. It is not mandatory. Okay? It is not mandatory, true. The country, region of origin of raw materials, product type. So you can see sampling location in the production chain, the principle of methods of analysis. So you have to indicate, is it an ICP-MS method? It's an AA method for heavy metals, etc. So you can see the level of information the template requires to submit. Of course, we will be discussing and having your questions and everything during our breakout rooms, but this was just to introduce for you this GEMS food template that we will be using in our breakout room. So finally, when you connect to the GEMS as a user here, not as a data submitter or provider, as a user, you will be able to access all this information. Okay, you can use different filters, and then you will select, let's say, a certain kind of residue or heavy metals, etc. And you will be accessing the result that can be also exported as an Excel. So if you need it, you can export it and you can use it. And finally, I will finish this presentation by this idea of calls for data. So the ideal situation for us is to understand this template, know how to use it, but please disclose your data. Disclose your results. Okay, let's start do this exercise. Understand the importance of sharing our data. And again, when you look at all the information required with the data, there is no particular confidential information to be submitted. We're not requesting the brand of the food. We're just requesting and waiting for the concentration and everything that will give me more information about this food. Okay? It is a disclosable information, right? معقول يكون في شيء ما بقدر أنا أكون عم شاركه؟ So it's important to share this data, and you understood why from the presentations, in order to have our situation represented in the setting of this maximum level, since we're speaking about this maximum level. Now, I will give you one example. One of the last calls for data, okay, that was published by JECFA. It was a request for data on total aflatoxins in ready-to-eat peanuts, okay? And it was one of the most important topics we worked on with the Arab community. Let's look on the requirements, okay, when you connect to this call for data. So please, I encourage you to connect to the page. You have the link. And you will see the different calls for data published by the JECFA Secretariat or other WHO agencies. And they will be requesting experts also. Why not you being experts? Okay, so now there is a lot of calls for experts and calls for data. So if we check the requirements when reading this or clicking on this call for data, they will tell you, for example, CCCF 17, which is last year's Codex Committee on Contaminants in Food. The last year's session, CCF 17, agreed to request the JECFA Secretariat to issue a call for data. So the risk manager is requesting the risk assessor to share a call for data on total aflatoxins in ready-to-eat peanuts. So why total aflatoxins? So it's the sum of the 4 aflatoxins, because here we're setting an ml, we were setting an ml for total aflatoxins in ready-to-eat peanuts. So in order for us to submit usable data, we have to submit all information that will allow CCCF or the electronic working group to differentiate between ready-to-eat peanuts and peanuts for further processing. And we have clear definitions for that. Okay? Through what we will be providing this information? Through appropriate food mapping. If we respect the food mapping, our GEMS administrator will be able to say that this data point corresponds to ready-to-eat peanuts, not to for further processing, or I don't know. So they are saying we are therefore requesting submission of new data or resubmission of data on total aflatoxins and ready-to-eat peanuts, data, and here they are starting to give you more information, data on occurrence of total aflatoxins for the last 10 years. So time trend of my data. Data collected with methods with LOQ of 4 microgram per kilogram or below. So any data point with no LOQ will be rejected. Any data point coming from an analytical method having an LOQ above 4 ppb will be rejected. So we have to really understand and have the information related to our analytical methodology, right? So we have to have good communication between the data provider. So hopefully, the data provider is our lab. But in case the data provider is not our lab, at least having good communication between the person providing the data and the lab generating the data. Because we need more information. I need to understand, okay? Data on ready-to-eat peanuts for which it can reasonably be assumed that at least 90% or more of the food item consists of peanut, and no more than 10% is flavor, condiments, coatings, and additives. So they are giving me very strict specification. My food should be constituted of more than at least 90% peanut and should be ready to eat peanut. And you can give me plenty of examples of ready to eat peanuts products, right? WHO will be compiling data for the JACFA Secretariat. All new data must be uploaded in the GEMS database. So our only exclusive database should be the GEMS food database to submit the data. In some situations, they might accept that you communicate directly with the chair of the electronic working group, for example. But that's not the ideal situation. The ideal situation, it's not one person to another person communication, is to follow the appropriate procedure of submitting data to the GEMS food database. Okay? Yes, Dr. Hadi. Yes. About what? No, what do you mean exactly by size of the sample? In order. No, normally they require the sampling plan that you used, and they require from you to tell them that this data point corresponds to one sample. So I had the result coming from one sample, but how you sampled, okay, you just give an information about the sampling plan or coming from an average of different. It's an aggregated sample. Yes. Yes. Look, normally the data cannot be misused in the situation of Codex. Exactly. But if we take our national situation, okay, and I'm submitting this data in order for my national situation or condition be represented, it will be the contrary. If I submit my data, I will have less restriction because the ML that it is developed will be taking into consideration my data. If I do not submit my data, this situation, I might have problems. Okay, I will give you an example. If I have a call for data, okay, for ready to eat peanuts or peanuts for further processing, right? And you are a big producer of peanuts for further processing. If you do not submit your data, they will be developing the ML without taking into consideration your production, and you are a big producer, then you will be facing a lot of problems, perhaps. However, if you submit your data when developing the ML itself, they will be considering your values in the development. That's what we will be discussing tomorrow. So sharing the data will be more important for you regarding this, okay? However, about the confidentiality of the data, you can say that my data is confidential. So they will use it within the electronic working group proceedings, but a simple user cannot access it. Okay, it will be hidden from a simple user, but they will be used. But always, there is absolutely no situation where sharing your data will create for you. Actually, if you do not share, you risk having problems. That's the rule of thumb of it. Okay, but we can have further discussion about particular scenarios. Yes, please. But let's have a microphone. Okay, because I finished my presentation, so let's take a few minutes.
Thank you. Just I have a question.
Yes, please.
This kind of supply chain data, if I understand it concerns only contaminants, not pesticide and drug.
No, you can submit residues using the same process.
But residues, for example, for pesticide, it comes from the fields.
Absolutely. So normally, as we said, the pesticide comes from field trials, but you can still submit data coming from monitoring and surveillance plots.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yes, please, but let's use the microphone.
So, okay, to answer him about the sampling techniques, usually we face a lot of problem when we what we should apply as a sampling plan, but it's related to the size of the lot. If you want to make a sampling from a sheep or a sampling from a warehouse, but I think the big problem is related when we do sampling on from field. So we just know the space area, the cultivated area, and then we apply a randomized sampling. So sampling, usually we adopt many documents from Codex and from European Union Commission to have a representative sampling, because we should have responsibility when we
Absolutely.
apply data on contaminants. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarifications. Absolutely. So the sampling, and as we're discussing, the sampling approach could bias my result. But in all situations, I will still be able to use my result, but being transparent and disclosing the limitations coming with my results, okay? So even in the GEMS food database, if you indicate that your sample is targeted, and as we said, targeted sampling will not provide results occurrence data which is representative, but at least say it, okay? You will say, and I will use it in the framework, okay? Yes, Dr. Karima.
معلومات أخرى إضافية حول السؤال الذي تم طرحه على في هل هناك بيانات يمكن يعني to exclude them within the Codex working group. فهذا ممكن لأن البيانات فكما تم الإشارة إليه خلال يعني العروض التقديمية، فلازم تكون البيانات يعني with good quality، وحتى يجب أن هذه البيانات يتم يعني تدوينها في المنصة بشكل صحيح. لأن في بعض الحالات إذا كنتم قد طلعتم على يعني الريبورت المقدم من طرف الوركينج جروب، في بعض الأحيان بعض البيانات يتم يعني رفضها، some data are excluded from the database، وذلك راجع لأن ال quality of data is not good، أو أن هناك miss of information related to this data. إذا كان the name is not mentioned يعني with the right way، أو هناك يعني LOD or LOQ are not mentioned. So كل هذه يعني الجوانب الهامة المتعلقة بالداتا لازم أن تكون مدونة في المنصة حتى يتم استعمالها من طرف يعني الكودكس في عدة يعني أشغال، مثلا في تحديد الحدود القصوى.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Karima. So please, let's have some microphones. And here, actually, we're preparing our breakout rooms, okay, through these questions.
شكرا دكتور أمين للعرض السريع بتاع حضرتك. أنا بس استكمالا لكلام دكتور كريمة، أنا ليا سؤال. هل لازم في كل بلد يبقى فيه فوكال بوينت أو حد مسؤول هو اللي يرفع الداتا على الجيمس فود؟ ومين اللي هيقدر يتحقق لي من صحة البيانات دي؟ زي ما حضرتك قلت إن أهم حاجة كواليتي أوف داتا. مين هيقدر يقول في كل جهة إن الداتا دي فاليد إن أنا أستخدمها من أي جهة؟ شكرا.
Thank you for your question. You know, that's the ideal situation. At least first, إذا بدنا نبدأ نقاشنا بهذا الموضوع, we need to have a national database, right? The starting point is to have a national program in order to collect the data, to compile the data, to organize the data, and having it ready to be submitted. من هون لازم نبدأ. And when we have a database, we should have a database manager, a management team, administrator, okay? So normally that's the ideal situation, having someone or a team or a group of people administrating a database. So this database should follow approximately similar templating, providing this kind of standardized information. And this team will have an account with the GEMS food database, and this team will be responsible of uploading and presenting the data. So what you're saying is absolutely true. That's the ideal situation. And the persons administrating the data, they will have the role of checking and preparing the quality of the data and checking the sources of the data from the country, okay? So they will be communicating with the different stakeholders and different data providers, trying to compile this data, checking do like a first check on the quality of the data before submitting it, okay? But then the GEMS food administrator team will be checking also on the data for any obvious errors or discrepancies, and they will be rejecting or recommunicating with the team. So of course we need a focal point, okay? Exactly. WHO Codex, they work with the same idea and with the same principles. We need to have a focal point. So that's the ideal situation. But then about the quality, we will have further discussions. But the idea, when you check the proceedings of the committees, you will find that they will be working with different levels of quality of data, okay? Depending on the situation. depending on the risk management situation. So in some instances, we will have some examples. They will be accepting some data, knowing that this data is biased in a certain situation. In other situation, no, they will be requiring like the highest accuracy related to the data. So the management thing that they will be doing, but it should be disclosed, clear, transparent, all limitations related to our data.